Jag bara nämna det, jag hoppas batterierna håller här. Det är inte 100% påfyllt, men vi kör på i alla fall. So we will continue. Most welcome to 1577, and we will continue with the first session. We are currently at page 12. 1576. We went through the program and how teleology slowly seeped into the project by happenstance and admittedly also by Francois Jacob. And as he said, for a long time, the biologist treated teleology as he would a woman he could not do without, but did not care to be seen with in public. It was very apt quote there. And this is the start of the program. It's also very important that the establishment of non-living things is on the way. Also indirectly. Inadvertently, I would say. And all of a sudden, we have a program going on. An automated, non-directed, ongoing process. That both happens by itself and has some sort of theology to it anyway. I could say this is the background. I will now continue on page 12 in the English translation pages. It's the 6th, 7th line now. The sentence beginning with others. And we just mentioned schooling and how schooling, education has been transmitted through the generations. I just let me quote the last sentence before we start. What are transmitted from generation to generation are the instructions specifying the molecular structures or the rigidity of the program, thus varies according to the operations. Certain instructions are carried out literally. Others, and then we start again, are expressed by capacities or potentialities. However, in the end, the program itself determines its degree of flexibility and the range of possible variations. There is no need to insist on the ease with which one might, without changing a word, transpose those statements in order to describe the functioning of all institutional programs. In particular, academic programs, and more precisely still those of competitive accents. We should not be astonished by this ease. It is not fortuitous if we consider that the code in which the modern biologist speaks is first of all that of language, of semiotics rather than linguistics, or even of grammatics. Which itself comes from the region of either the institution in general or the academic in particular. Very important. Or else that the two codes, the genetic and the academic, have a common provenance or appetence that will have to be questioned. As for the word teaching, it is there as well. At issue is the old problem of the heredity of acquired characteristics. And here we have it in a nutshell. It's the heredity of acquired characteristics. No matter we're talking DNA, genetics, biology, copying of Bible scripts, as we mentioned before, or law books are important as well. Jacob does not think that the word teaching is in itself inappropriate to designate the operation by which heredity is transmitted. The risk is that this word might lead one to think that the teaching done by heredity is absolutely identical to the teaching that is provided in schools through spoken language, the memory of the brain, etc. I think I really like this, the memory of the brain. A little sort of genetic code in the brain that we inherit from moment to moment. And here we're going to see just what, according to Jacob, the principle as well as the explanation is of these metaphorical possibilities. What does the paragraph in which we read the expression teaching heredity say exactly? It first notes that an organism is a transition between what was and what will be. We have almost Aristotelian potentiality here. An organism cannot be thought, as it were, in the present. It is not first of all the production of a present. It is first of all in advance, what I would call an effect of reproduction. It is first of all in advance, what I would call an effect of reproduction. It begins not with production, but with reproduction. So it doesn't have an internal aim, so to speak. Reproduction, says Jacob, represents for the organism both the beginning and the end, the cause and the aim. It's just brilliant. Now it was in order to think this reproduction that the classic problematic of biology or genetics came to be constituted, oscillating between finalism and mechanism, necessity and chance, fixity and transformation. Here we have all the goodies. Let me just check that we have enough juice here on the computer. Warm. I have enough. We can continue. Thank you. Really getting into the goody stuff here, and it's this oscillating, if you understand that, oscillating between finality and fixity, necessity and chance, going in between constantly, fixity and transformation. That is how it is played out. It is precisely to the notion of program that Jacob attributes the power to erase the oppositions, even the contradictions that constitute this classic problematic. The philosophy or the metaphysics of this classic problematic it's also an age-old problem. with the application to heredity of the concept of program, certain biological contradictions, formally summed up in a series of antitheses, at least disappear. Finality and mechanism, necessity and contingency, stability and variation. How does Jacob conceive of or construct this concept of program? It does not retain the reference that is found within it to inscription or to the graphic. Either in the sense of phonetic writing or in the sense of non-phonetic writing, that is symbols, signs. Good to go to and understand, I think of the DNA as a sort of writing. It is seen as non-phonetic or symbolic. We will come back to this in a different way later. In order to construct or to analyze the concept of program as it functions in the field of genetics, Jacob retains two essential predicates. What he calls two notions, memory and project. Memory and project, two notions. And it is within these two notions, each divided and articulated from within, that he determines both the analogy and the difference that, on the one hand, legitimates metaphor, in parenthesis, and it's important. The fact that one speaks, for example, of project and of memory, and of parenthesis, and causes confusion. And it is within these two notions, each divided and articulated from within, that he determines both the analogy and the difference that, on the one hand, legitimates metaphor. The fact that one speaks, for example, of project and memory, and causes confusion. It's very important. So the metaphor needs to be legitimated. But you will have understood this concept of program, when rightly understood and having been reworked by modern genetic science, must at once authorize one to speak of program, memory, and project, and prohibit confusion. Confusion needs to be evicted. Let us first read this. The concept of program blends two notions which had always been intuitively associated with the living beings, and those are memory and project. Very pertinent. Let's not quibble with Jacob here over what he calls the intuition that associates memory and project with living beings. Especially since Jacob is justified in calling this an intuition. Thereby implying that it is confused, and since his intention is to find within the origin of a confusion between two types of memory and two types of project, he writes, and listen now, this is that's a very kernel of Jacob here in this. By memory is implied the traits of the parents, which heredity brings out in a child. By project is implied the plan which controls the formation of an organism down to the last detail. First, with respect to the inheritance of the acquired characters. The idea that the environment can teach, enseigner heredity, represents an intuitively natural confusion between the two kinds of memory, genetic and mental. This is a very important distinction for Jacob, trying to uphold. Move once more backwards. Sorry. Fiddling. I'm making it to the stretch. I recommend that as well. Could be good to turn the neck left, right. Keep the other side. So to the piece as well. It's a micro summary, you can say. He's trying to institute different opposition, uphold them through the text as he thinks them necessary for the direction of his writing. This is what Derrida is pointing to. Very short micro. Before going any further, let me specify that the confusion in Jacob's eyes lies not in the expression teach heredity, but in the concept that we are going to form of this teaching as soon as we confuse the two memories that must be distinguished, genetic and mental. Each of these two memories corresponds to a certain state of emergence, accompanied certain states of emergence accompanied by a break. In both memories, there is conservation. This is actually Jacob's own word. Conservation is being contained through the generations of the past and transmission. But with the emergence of the living, there is first constituted the genetic memory of heredity, which is absolutely rigid. We mentioned that before, that the rigidity is in itself very good. There will later be within the living another break. Γεια σου Σοφία. Καλά, εσύ. Δουλειά. Βέλεν. There will later be within the living another break, the emergence of another memory, that of the brain, says Jacob. Which is much more flexible with thoughts and language, which can transmit what is acquired and learned within a lifetime, acquired characteristics, whereas genetic memory resists this. Now, since there are certain analogies, this again is Jacob's word between the two systems, that of genetic memory and that of mental memory. His brain, thought, language, the intuitive analogy, and thus all the genetical institutional metaphorics has some legitimacy. There you go. But it loses this legitimacy as soon as it transforms the analogy into identity, listen here, into identity, and the two memories become assimilated as do the two systems. This is the pivotal term. This is the hub of the system. It's even better now. This is the hub, the nexus, where everything turns about. Yet it is through analogy that the concept of program and even that of teaching, as you might remember, of heredity can cover the entire field of both systems and resolve the classical contradictions. How brilliant. It is just that we need to say that. Within the program, within general programmaticity, that there are two distinct types of programs, the rigid and the flexible. They are both needed. There is thus a rigid teaching and a flexible one, a transmission of invariance and a variable transmission of variables. Two types of schools, if you will, two systems of teaching and of programming at ends and at opposition to each other, but also cooperating. They are systems because they are closed in their own way, and they have their own logic, their immanence, their internal regulation or normativity. It is not that one of them, the flexible or liberal one, has to do with the outside and the other does not. Also very important. It's not the takeaways here. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. The relation to the outside is more complex, and that is what I really want to insist on now. It is seemingly a flexible system, brain, thought, language, the one that would be more naturally compared to pedagogical institutions. Makes sense, doesn't it? We think them to be more flexible. That has a relation to its outside. And registers its effects. It is porous, osmotic if you want, susceptible to the influences of history and of politico-economic field. The other program, on the contrary, the genetic is completely closed off to all this, repeating like a parroting scholasticism, the internal prescription. That is the program. That is the computational transference of original to original in the genetic code, or what you prefer. The other program, on the contrary, The genetic is completely closed off to all this, repeating like a parroting scholasticism, the internal prescription. And now we have the characters of the protagonist of this role play that Jacob is playing out well established. That is what Jacob initially leads us to think. He writes this, which I read as a reminder. And listen up. The 2 points of rupture in evolution. First, the emergence of the living. Later, the emergence of thought and language. Each correspond to the appearance of a mechanism of memory, that of heredity, and that of mind. There are certain analogies between the two systems. Both were selected for accumulating and transmitting past experience. We have the past again. And in both, the recorded information is maintained only as far as it is reproduced at each generation. However, the two systems differ with respect to their nature and to the logic of their performance. The flexibility of mental memory makes it particularly apt for the transmission of acquired characters. The flexibility of the mental memory makes it particularly apt for transmission of acquired characters. The rigidity of genetic memory prevents such transmissions. It's too rigid, it's too stable. Both are needed, as I mentioned. The genetic program, indeed, is made up of a combination of essentially invariant elements. By its very structure, the message of heredity does not allow the slightest concerted intervention from the outside. Also very important. So only the brain side, the mental side is flexible enough to be able to sort of transfer what is contingent. I will redo some quotes here. Just very thin with interesting information and stuff. Page 12, we have the memory of the brain, etc. Here it's introduced for the first time. That makes for metaphorical possibilities. Later on page 12. Very down on the page. An organism cannot be thought as it were. This is page 12. Very down on the page. Let's split down. It's the last. On the bottom is the last 6 lines, 7 lines. And oh, yes, correct, thanks. An organism cannot be thought as it were in the present. It is not first of all the production of the present. Comes in memory, flexible memory. It is first of all in advance what I would call an effect of reproduction. And here we have the two systems of reproduction, so to speak. The inflexible and the contingent one. And at the very end of that page, now it was in order to think this reproduction that the classical problematic of biology or genetics came to be constituted, oscillating, and this is so good, between finalism and mechanism, necessity and chance, fixity and transformation. And now we're on page 13, and we have the introduction of two essential predicates. Sentence beginning with Jacob. What he calls two notions, memory and project. It's like a play on Molière over that the development. I see. And it is within these two notions, each divided and articulated from within, that's also important, that it determines both the analogy and the difference that, on the one hand, legitimates metaphor and cause confusion. So he wants to do two things at the very same time. He needs the metaphor, but at the same time, he doesn't need it. He doesn't want it. And he can have the cookie and eat it. And later, we will see that the concept of program blends the two notions, which had always been intuitively associated with living beings, namely memory and project. So he both upholds the distinction between the two projects and confuses them, intermingles them. We continue to page 14. So it's the eighth line on page 14. We have, but with the emergence of the living, there is first constituted the genetic memory of heredity, which is absolutely rigid. There will later be within the living another break, the emergence of another memory, that of the brain, which is much more flexible, which can transmit what is acquired, what is learned. Me holding the microphone, learning to speak, and so on and so on. Now, since there are certain analogies, this again in Jacob's words, between the two systems, that of genetic memory and that of mental memory, and thus all of genetic or institutional metaphorics has some legitimacy. But it loses its legitimacy as soon as it transforms the analogy into identity, and the two memories become assimilated, as do the two systems. And that second move is not something that Jacob wants to be pressing too hard or putting at a central point in the text. It's marginalized. And later on page 14, we go into the problem of the outside. It is not that one of them. This is let's see, 6, 10 from the bottom, or 13. It is not that one of them, the flexible or liberal one, has to do with the outside and the other does not. But it's much more complex here, and of course the problems adds here. Speaking of the outside world and how to introduce it. So it doesn't become a solipsistic determined system or too contingent when it's just outside and just the flexible range system. On page 15, where I also end, another quote. I'll continue this most interesting maybe in the afternoon. By its very structure, the message of heredity does not allow the slightest concerted intervention from the outside. Jacob needs to bring in the outside, otherwise he will be engulfed in problems. That's my summary. Maybe we have some questions.
Thank you so much, Hans.
Thank you very much.
And I think it's a very good summary. I don't have much to add. But I can highlight again 2 of the keywords. Okay, so the keywords are the 2 keywords. One was here on page 14. On page 14, you see one of the keywords, rigid. Rigid. Jacob wants rigid categories. Do you hear me, Hans?
Yes, indeed.
He wants rigid categories. So the keyword here is rigid, page 14. Another was, as you already pointed out, the outside. So the outside is suppressed. That's something dangerous. I think that is also the weak point of Richard Dawkins and others. Who, and also it goes back to Darwin. It's evolution is internal in some way. I don't know how much ambience or the environment you have in Darwin, or everything is, so to say, internal development. Hans.
That is one of the problems that Darwin, Dawkins, Jacob, and of course Monodus, and all the other ones. If you have too determined genetic code, the rigid system of programming, there is no need for an outside world at all. And, these are these problems that Jacob are constantly ending up into. Tries to hide, if you like. They take a marginalized part of the text. They're still there. They are admitted, of course. They are used for the metaphors because they are important. But they are not in the central tenet, what he wants to say.
However, let's say the dichotomy, life and death.
You need to raise your voice a little bit, Kalle.
So the dichotomy, life and death.
Yes.
So in this dichotomy, life and death, it's easy perhaps to say that death is from the outside, while it's already internal. or what would you say? Dichotomy life and death, both are internal already.
Yeah, you have a big similarity, and I think Derrida is coming back to that. I was peeking in the text further, especially session 2. There is a certain outsideness, as you say, to death and life. Usually, in this programming idea, life is completely internal. Can you understand this? How Jacob puts it forward? He ends up in the problem that life is just the reprogramming, the reproduction of the schooling system, so to speak, which is one metaphor that obviously is constantly underneath here. That makes life something, in the take of Jacob, Monod, and Dawkins, and many others, all of them, I would say. Tank, the Monod professor as well, makes lives too internal, with no need for an outside wall, and that needs to be fixed somewhere in the text. So you're absolutely right there.
So let me return to one last phrase. It's on page 12. So let me return to page 12.
I hardly hear you there, Kalle.
Page 12. Page 12.
Please stay close to the microphone.
Page 12. Page 12. Page 12. We had, let me see. Yes. So here on page 12, reproduction, says Jacob, represents for the organism both the beginning and the end, the cause and the aim. Is extremely important, as you already mentioned. So I could apply to my own field, New Testament studies, and the copying of manuscripts, where you could say reproduction or the copying of manuscripts represents for the text both the beginning and the end, the cause and the aim. So it's only the mechanical reproduction that is the highest, is the also only aim. It's the beginning and the end, the cause and the aim.
Yeah, right, you Kalle. Fantastic.
So it's a great quotation. Great quotation.
Yeah, it's a fantastic site. You keep that one. Derrida is just excellent in this part. I've never seen him so clear, and it's easier for me to understand too. It's not as condensed as we find in each other scriptures. It opens up to a great more understanding, but it's an easier understanding. It's a fantastic text.
Perhaps we should end there if you don't want to add something.
Just give us a second. Should I end the recording now?
Yes, you could.
You can linger on for a second there.
Yes.